Shavua Tov, everybody. Good Vach. Thank you for those who are joining us for our Mesilas Yesharim class. For those watching on Facebook, I have a feeling that the live stream might not be working so well. So if it's getting cut off, I apologize, but we will have a YouTube version which will be recorded and better quality after. So for those following in this book, we're using again the Art Scroll Mesilas Yesharim, The Path of the Just. We're on page 181. We're chapter 11, and we are talking about the particulars of cleanliness, spiritual cleanliness, which is Nikius. And what the Maramchal is doing now, he's going through many mitzvahs that people often forget certain aspects of, certain particulars. And now we're talking about theft, gezel, that even though most people would not go into a store and rob something and just like steal something and take it out, or go into a gun and rob a bank, there are many other aspects of theft that people aren't necessarily so careful of. So we learned earlier about being honest in business, and when you work for somebody that you have to put in all your hours, and you can't leave your job early if you're getting paid for that, and you have to focus on your work while you're working. That's a type of theft that people don't necessarily realize. If anyone has any questions, you can email me, or if you're watching on Facebook, you can just post in the comments, and hopefully I could answer in real time. Let's continue, and thank you to Herb for the Shavua Tov YouTube. Okay. Re'ena be'inyan ha'hona kamanakal hula adam lehisfatos ulikashol kasher lechera yera lo shiroi hu lishtadul liapus choraso be'enei hanashim ulistakar b'yagia kapov. Now he says we're going to talk about hona, which is doing something wrong. The way they translate it is doing something wrong in finance. It can also mean overcharging. That right, people, you have a store. You want to make your stuff, your wares, look as nice as possible. So what do? You clean up the stuff. You make it look nice. And what do? You make your products look very nice, and you try to convince people to buy it. Right? What could be wrong with that? And you say about it, Yesh zaras v'nischer. Right? The Torah says, right, you should be azaras, you should be alacritous. Right? We learned the alacrity when it came to mitzvahs. Right? Of course, the Torah wants me to make my products look nice and to convince people to buy it. The Torah says you have to put effort into stuff. Yad charutzim ta'ashir, and those who are diligent will prosper. Amnam im lo yidaktek v'yishko ma'asav harbe hine tachas chita yetze chayach. He says, if you don't weigh your actions very carefully, instead of wheat, thorns will emerge. Meaning that not every type of convincing people to buy your product and making your wares look nice is allowed. You have to be careful. If you're not careful, you could violate the prohibition of cheating people in business. You're not allowed to cheat somebody. You're not allowed to oppress somebody. It says even a non-Jew, it's prohibited to cheat, right? Don't think that you're only allowed to, right? Certain mitzvahs only apply to Jews, like, because we're all family. So certain mitzvahs we only, you have to act, right? Just like most people act better towards their family, there's a certain kinship. So there are certain mitzvahs which apply to other Jews, but not to people who aren't Jewish. That doesn't apply with this. One has to be honest in business to a Jew and to a non-Jew. There's no distinction. Just because someone's not Jewish is not an excuse to not treat him honestly in business. That's totally wrong. Ukraksiv, it's a verse. She'eris Yisrael lo yasu avla. The remnant of the Jewish people will not do an avla, will not do something bad. They will not, and they will not speak deceivingly, and a deceitful tongue will not be found in their mouth. V'chein amru. So, meaning that sometimes people think when they have a store and they're trying to sell things, you sometimes say things which aren't so accurate, or you only say the positive things about the product, and you don't say anything negative. You try to hide the negative aspects. That's not allowed. If you have a store, you have to be honest about your product. You are not allowed to lie to people and misrepresent your product so that people buy it. It says, Ein mefarkasin es hakelim hayeshanim sheyiru bechadashim. You're not allowed to, for instance, you're not allowed to take old products, old vessels, and refurbish them to make them look new and not tell people about it. You can, you're selling pots and pans, and they're old pots and pans. You can't scrub them up to make the pots and pans look new, and so the people will think they're new. Totally forbidden. It says, Ein ma'arvin peris beperis, afilu chadashim bechadashim. You're not allowed to mix different types of fruits from different fields, and even if they're both new. Afilu sa bedinar, afilu yafe. Afilu sa bedinar. 1 second. Of afilu yafe dinar utrisis loy arvim karim sa bedinar. He says, let's say you have 2 bundles of produce. Let's say one bundle costs $1 per pound, and another bundle of produce costs $1.50 per pound. And you mix them all together, and you sell them for $1 a pound, meaning you sell it for the lower price, right? What could be wrong with that? Again, you have one bucket of produce that's $1 a pound, and another bucket $1.50 a pound. You mix them all together, and you sell them for $1 a pound. What could be wrong with that? You're giving the guy a discount. So you're not allowed to do that because maybe for some reason this guy prefers the produce which came from the $1.50 a pound for whatever reason. He prefers the more expensive produce for whatever reason, and he would rather have that, and the discount doesn't make a difference to him. So the idea is, even though you're giving him a discount, you have to be totally honest in business, and everyone has to know what they're buying, what they're purchasing. It says, Kol ose ele, kol ose avel. Kari chamishi shemus. Whoever does this deceitful act is called 5 things. What are these 5 things? The Medrash says that a person who cheats in business, who's not honest in business, what are these 5 things? Aval, he's called disgraceful. Sanoi, hated. Meshukat's disgusting. Cherim, banned. Toeva, an abomination. So it's very, very serious. Again, so one has to be so careful in business that when you own a store and you're selling things, you're obviously allowed to say positive things about the stuff you're selling, but it all has to be accurate, and you're not allowed to hide any of the negative qualities about your product, and you're not allowed to mix different produce, even though they're the same quality and they're both good produce, and even if one's more expensive and you're giving a discount, you're not allowed to do it because maybe the purchaser, your customer, prefers that produce that came from, he prefers the New Jersey tomatoes versus the Pennsylvania tomatoes, and for some reason the Pennsylvania tomatoes are more expensive. So you have to be honest and accurate with that. Okay, let's continue. Page 184. Odom Zichron Levracha, the rabbi said, Kol hagozel es chavero afilu shava pruta ki ilu noto nashru mimenu. Somebody who steals from his friend, even a pruta, meaning a pruta is like the lowest level of currency that they had, so it's like a penny, maybe a couple pennies. Anyone who takes even that amount, it's like he's stealing his friend's soul. So you take a paperclip from somebody without his permission, right? You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to take a paperclip from someone's desk if they don't give you permission. And it says if you take even something which is a shava pruta, worth a pruta, it's like you're taking his soul. You see how serious the sin of theft is, even with a small amount. It says in the Gemara, the rain stop because people steal. If there is a basket full of sins, on what sin does a person get punished for first? Barosh kulam, gazel, theft. And God decided to destroy the world at the time of the flood, Noah and the flood, because of gezel, because of theft. If you say in your heart, he says, how could it be? Right? We gave all of these rules about when you have a store, about what you're not allowed to do to convince people to buy your produce. So how are you supposed to be a storekeeper? So chiluk gadol yesh b'davar. There's a big difference. Ki kol ma shehu laharos es hakainim emitas tuva chayvetz v'yafyo ina ishtadlus hahu tov yasher. Anytime you're, like we mentioned, anytime you're telling somebody positive attributes about your products, and you're saying the positive things, and it's true, you're allowed to do that. That's correct. But when you try to disguise things that are wrong with your product, this is ona. This is totally forbidden. And this is a big rule in the laws of business. Okay, so just stop here for a second. That right when tricking people, you can't be. No offense to used car salesmen, but you're not allowed to be the stereotypical used car salesman where he's trying to sell you a car and it's really a lemon. That is totally prohibited against the Torah, and that's a type of theft, right? Many people, many stereotypical, again, no offense to the used car salesman, they wouldn't go into a bank and rob it, but when it comes to selling a product to make a nice profit, then they would do that. And we just think that when we have trust in Hashem, that our livelihood really comes from Hashem, and when we really believe that, we won't have to resort to these things, and we can know that if we follow the rules of the Torah when it comes to the way we're supposed to conduct business, then that is we will be fine. We don't have to do all these things. Okay, so he continues. He says, "Lo amar me'inyan amidos shahar beferish kasban." He's like, we're not going to talk a long time. There's another aspect of theft. He says, but we're not going to talk a long time about it because it's an explicit verse. One has to have accurate weights and measures, right? If you have let's say, I don't know, off the top of my head, if you have a fish store, you sell different types of fish. You can't have, when you're weighing the fish to sell, you can't have inaccurate scales so that you are cheating people in the amount of fish that they get. It says, it's an abomination. Anyone who does this, who has inaccurate scales. The punishment for having non-accurate scales is worse than the punishment of the acts of sexual immorality. All right. I once heard that the reason that it's called an abomination, why is it an abomination to have inaccurate scales? So the word toeva, abomination, refers to anything that you use it for the opposite of its intended purpose. The purpose of a scale is to give someone the accurate weight and the accurate price for what he's purchasing. But you take that object, the scale, which is supposed to be used for honesty, and you pervert it to be dishonest. So that's why it's called an abomination. Va'amru, it says, Hasitun mekanech midosav achos l'shoshim yom, that the wholesaler has to clean his weights once every 30 days. V'kol kach lama, why does he have to clean his scale so much? Kadesh lo yachsur below das v'layanish, that he shouldn't not give the person, maybe, if he doesn't clean his scales, what's going to happen? He'll, it explains in the bottom that's talking about scales that are used to measure liquid, that some of the liquid will get attached to the side, so when you fill up the scale, and you pour it out, he's not going to be getting all of his liquid because some of the weight will be taken by what was attached to the side. So therefore, a wholesaler who's constantly using his scales has to clean them once every 30 days so that he doesn't cheat his customers and that he doesn't get punished. Okay, kol shechein avan haribis. Now another sin regarding theft is ribis, interest. A Jew is not allowed to charge interest to another Jew. Charging interest is like being a heretic, which is obviously a very, very serious. It says, someone who gives and takes interest, he will not live, right? And it's a prohibition to be the lender with interest and the borrower with interest. They're both prohibited. It says that somebody who lends with interest will not come back alive with the resurrection of the dead. Actual Torah ribis and rabbinic level ribis is disgusting in front of Hashem. He says, the Ramchal says he doesn't see the need to discuss this at length because every Jewish person knows how serious it is. So I wonder if that's still true nowadays. Many people don't even, unfortunately, know that there's a prohibition to lend with interest and to borrow with interest. Okay, let's just go a little further. Amnam. Klal shel davar, the principle is, the desire for money is very, very great. Kain Mikshalosav Rabim. Just like the desire for money is great, people like money, people really, really like money, so too the ways that people can sin when it comes to making money are also great. And the way that a person could be clean from all of these sins, he has to be very careful. He needs to, first of all, he needs to learn the laws to know what the Torah says, how one is allowed to make money. And he has to examine his deeds. And if he's clean from all of these things, he's already reached a great level. Ki rabim yischastu ba'anafim rabim me'anfei achassidus be'inyin sinas habetza lo yochel lagiel mechos hashleimus. He says many people are able to be very pious when it comes to certain mitzvahs, comes to certain ways to follow the Torah, but when it comes to following all of the halachas about money, that's a different story. It's very difficult for people. So if you can get to the level where you're following all of the Torah's laws and details when it comes to the honestly making money and not stealing, you've come to a great level. Humasha Amar Tzofer Namasi Le'Eov. It's what Sofer the Namasi said to Eov. Im Oven Biyadcha Harchikeu Va'al Tashkin Ba'alecha Avlo Ki Az Tisa Panecha Mimum Va'isimutzak V'lo Sira. He says if there's iniquity in your hand, which he says refers to theft, then put it far away from you. He says, and then you will lift your head without blemish. So if somebody does not violate any of the sins when it comes to theft, he's on a very lofty level. Vihine, he says, the barti adhena meprate mitzvah achas min mitzvahs. The Ramchal says, I talk now about many of the details about one mitzvah, referring to the about theft. Elavade shenimtzim b'chol mitzvah mitzvah. Abnei neinei masker ala osam shurgilim rov bnei adam liikashu b'hem. So he says we spoke about one mitzvah with many of the details, but he says obviously there are many details with all of the mitzvahs in the Torah, but we are not going to speak about them. We're only going to speak about the mitzvahs which people commonly make mistakes in. So we finish now talking about theft. Next week, God willing, we'll read about another mitzvah that people often make mistakes in. But the idea is that we are on the level of the Ramchal in Mesilas Yesharim, where we are trying to not only not violate the sins that everybody knows about. Everybody knows that the Torah does not allow somebody to go into a bank and hold it up at gunpoint and demand all the money. But in addition to that, we learned that there are other things that apply, which means such as like we said, working. When you work for somebody, you have to put in your full effort. You can't take off early, about not misrepresenting products when you sell them, about not lending with interest. And there are many, many details when it comes to theft that people aren't so careful in. He brings a story here, a famous story, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. I heard it actually from the Chafetz Chaim once, but he says it's Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, that there was a shochet in town. He slaughtered meat for the town so that people could have kosher meat. And he was a very holy man, and he told the rabbi, he says, I don't want to slaughter the meat anymore because maybe I'll make a mistake and people will eat non-kosher food because I made a mistake. So the rabbi said, well, what do you plan to do to make a living? He said, well, I'm going to go into business. So the rabbi said, go into business? You know how many halachas there are about going into business? Did you know the laws about onah, about gezel, about ribis? There's so many details, so many more details of laws that you have to know before you go into business than there is to slaughter meat. A lot less laws when it comes to slaughter meat. A lot more mitzvahs when it comes to business. And he says people don't realize that. Like the Ramchal said, people very often are pious in every area of their life, but when it comes to the laws of money, then people get a little, try to skirt around the edges a little bit. But obviously, anyone who is in business, has a store, it's definitely worth it to learn these halachas, to know what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. And he says, anytime there's a desire to do something, there are great pitfalls, right? And we know most humans have a desire for money. People like getting money. So sometimes we don't act appropriately when we try to get that money. So therefore, it's very important to learn all the halachas to be totally clean from the sin of theft. Thank you to everyone for coming, and hope everyone has a wonderful, beautiful week.